Hello and welcome to this vodcast, which is about reaching and engaging families for the 2-year-old entitlement. It's part of a Hempsels and Coram Family and Childcare project that we were funded by the Department for Education for. It's a project that ran from November 2020 to March 2021, all focusing on the 2-year-old entitlement and doing what we can to refresh and revitalise and to perhaps rethink the approaches that we can all adopt and use to help families with the 2-year-old entitlements, not only reach them, but to engage with them and to help them take up their 2-year-old entitlement. We, in this project, worked with 20 targeted local authorities, and as part of that, we identified what would or could make a difference to those local strategies for 2-year-old take-up. And a common finding of that work was a need to think about how we reach all families, so Black, minority, ethnic families, being a key issue, but others too. So what we wanted to do, because we knew as experienced organisations in this field that there was plenty of material and research and information out there. So we wanted to take some time to provide something that was a little bit more useful. So we've collated the held information, we've analysed it, we've updated it, and we've provided some extra guidance into how local areas could or should develop their reach, engagement and take-up strategies. So today's vodcast is part of that. We've developed a briefing. We've already held a coffee break meeting of local authorities to discuss the issues, and today's event enables us to put some words and some energy into the content that we've collected. So that's enough from me. I'm now happy to and pleased to be handing over to Megan Jarvie from Coram Family and Childcare.
Thank you, James. So yes, I'm Megan, I'm Head of Coram Family and Childcare, and my colleague Ellie, who's the Programme Manager and manages Parent Champions at Coram Family and Childcare, are going to talk through the work that James just described. We're also very, very pleased to be joined by two colleagues from Reading. Marianne Mackey is the Family Information Services and Local Offer Manager, and Lorna McGifford is the 2-year-old lead for Reading Brighter Futures for Children. And they're going to be talking through about what they've done locally. Reading have been doing some fantastic stuff around uptake of the 2-year-old offer, and so they're going to give a bit of context to some of our findings and talk about how they've applied them locally. As James said, this guide that we've created is a review of the evidence that's already out there, but we've also tried to make it really practical for local authorities. And so we've matched the evidence with the practice that is already going on. And so we've given case studies and ideas about what's already happening across the country, with the hope that that will be really helpful for informing your practice and what you want to do locally. We talk quite a lot about BAME families because we know there's a specific focus on some groups of BAME families where uptake is a lot lower. It's obviously important to say that this is not one homogenous group, and that for some BAME groups uptake is actually very high, but we're trying to pick out some of the difference locally because we know that some groups face particular social, cultural and language and information barriers, as that's really what we're trying to look at. So I will hand straight over to Ellie, who'll start going through some of the things that we want to talk about today.
Thanks, Megan. So as we all know, partnership working is effective. It's important to engage and support a wide range of partners with information and resources. Focus on partners that reach families you might otherwise struggle to reach. So this could be faith groups or GPs, and it can be useful for passing on information in other languages. The evidence shows that partner settings can actually be more effective in raising take-up than council services. Lambeth Council, for example, found that providing translation services did little to increase uptake of the 2-year-old offer in communities with large proportions of non-English speakers or people who spoke English as an additional language, and that faith groups, children's centres and healthcare professionals were really effective in spreading messaging about entitlements. There are different approaches in terms of whether or not to translate resources. Translated resources alone might not yield good results, but having good routes in getting translated resources to families can be a key factor in making it worthwhile. Partner organisations can again be really important for this. In Redbridge, the Children's Centre team created talking books to pass out to partners and supported them with their entitlement messaging. These make it easier for partner organisations to talk with parents about free entitlements without feeling that they have to know everything themselves. Mariam and Lorna, you've a wide range of partners who you work with on an ongoing basis. Have you got any tips around building and maintaining these partnerships?
We feel in Reading that working with our partner agencies is really, really important. So working with our voluntary community and faith sector organisations, many of them have direct contact with families. The families are used to using the organisations, are familiar with the staffing there. So it's really important that we engage directly with our partner agencies to make sure that the information about two-year funding is embedded in their kind of day-to-day practice. So what we tend to do is we regularly send out updates to our voluntary community organisations, encourage them to share that information with families. If the families need further information on things like childcare, what settings are available, we offer a brokerage service to make sure that those vulnerable families have access to high quality information, but also the whole support from start to finish, to completing the application, to accessing the childcare. So I think working with the partner agencies is really critical. One example of what we did during COVID was working with the food banks and making sure that we distributed information about two-year funding through our local food banks, and that seems to have a good impact on take-up.
Thank you very much. So the next point I wanted to make was about finding out what works locally, because we know that there are common themes across the country for what works, but there are also local differences, and it's really important to listen to parents to really get that insight about what's going to work for your local communities. It can really help you see things see the same problems with a fresh pair of eyes, and suddenly review how you're doing things based on their feedback, to realise that there are different ways of doing it, and also to avoid some of the common pitfalls that come up. So as an example for some of the things that have been done locally, in Dorset they ran a consultation on their golden tickets to really decide the look, feel, wording for their golden tickets. And it led to some quite significant changes to their approach, which I thought was really interesting. They started using the phrase learn and play sessions rather than childcare, because parents said quite strongly that they felt that was much more effective for families who are a bit nervous about putting their children into childcare at age 2, or felt like that was quite young, and to really emphasise the learning and the playing was much more effective in breaking down some of those barriers. And to build on what Ellie was just saying about partner organisations, they can also provide a really useful insight into the wants and needs of local communities, and might be talking to families that your team aren't talking to, and so give that extra insight. In Trafford, they recognised this, and they ran an engagement event with partners, which allowed them to gather this insight, as well as building up that partnership, and it increased the buy-in from partners to help with the outreach strategy further along the line, because they felt that their feedback had been really listened to and was informing what was being done. So Mariam and Lorna, have you found that working with partners or parents has helped to give you a new insight into things that could work locally?
We do get a lot of feedback from parent carers on their experience of using funded childcare, and I think it's really important that the messaging meets the family's needs. So what we found is making sure that we kind of continue with the messaging rather than doing big campaigns. We found that doing regular messaging using things like social media, Facebook, working with our partners. We send out mail outs with our partner organisations who cascade that information to families. We work with Brighter Futures for Children comms team, the Reading Borough Council comms team, and other comms teams throughout Reading, to make sure that we keep that messaging consistent. Messaging, it's really important. We work with things like schools and our existing childcare providers, because they have direct direct contact with families as well. Our parent and toddler groups, we make sure that our kind of faith organisations running those groups have up-to-date information about the funded offer. So I think it's used in a combination of lots of different ways to communicate that, but also kind of when we speak to families, we always ask them, how did you find out about two-year funding? Because that's really critical in establishing what is working and what isn't working. And generally, we find that it's word of mouth. Social media plays quite a key part in information that parents have found out through, in Reading, we have a lot of kind of the Gossip Girl Facebooks, and I think they play quite a vital role in making sure that information does go out. So I think it's just using lots of different methods of getting the information out there rather than just using one form that seems to work really well. With our BAME groups, we have got quite a few BAME organisations in Reading, and we work closely with them to make sure that all communities have access to the information. We always offer a brokerage service to those organisations, so where a family needs extra help to access a funded place, then the support's available. So we want to make sure there's no barriers there in accessing the funded place. Lorna, is anything else you'd like to add to my comments?
I think I'll just follow on and say that we've put together a survey that will be going to the families that had completed an online application, so whether or not the child's in a registered provider, to get their first-hand feedback on how they found the process. And then the idea is that we analyse that feedback and share it on the 2-year-old funding page. So it's a you said we did document for them.
Megan, I'd also like to add that in Reading, we kind of keep all our information about two-year funding on one page on the Family Information Directory. We've found that has really helped parent carers. So at the end of each quarter, we do track back calls to parent carers just to find out, have they found the journey easy? How can we improve? Was the information okay? Did they manage to find the childcare that they needed? And I think the feedback that we got is that having information about two-year funding on one page, so they can find out about the immediate vacancy childcare providers, all the providers that are registered, the access to the portal, the questions that sit within the two-year funded section has really helped parent carers understand that the page can be translated into different languages through Google Translate. And also Lorna and the early years team have put together the two-year funding leaflets that are available in 10 different languages, and most spoken in the Reading area. So again, a combined way of getting that information has really helped.
That's great. Thank you both. That takes us really nicely onto our next slide, which looks at simple, accessible communication. So in the guide, we looked at both general marketing and targeted marketing campaigns. General marketing campaigns aim to build awareness with clear and consistent messaging, and local authorities have advertised in a range of locations, including on refuse collection lorries, on bus stops, till receipts, and via flyers in settings frequented by families with young children, such as GP surgeries or libraries. So again, kind of partnership can be key here. Targeted marketing campaigns tend to make use of the lists of parents of potentially eligible two-year-olds, which local authorities are sent by the Department for Work and Pensions. So perhaps unsurprisingly, what we found very much backs up what we've just heard from Reading. So simple, accessible communication is best. So make sure any mail outs are visually appealing and that they're easy to understand, and that web pages are really easy to navigate. Consider the needs of families who might have limited understanding of the childcare system, and focus on messages around the benefits for children of attending early education. Make sure messaging is clear and explains what the entitlement is. It's really important to pass on information about what the entitlement is, as well as why parents would use it. So try to make communications easy to understand for all parents. This can include video, images, diagrams of the process, and also, as we've just heard, translation. We know a simple and easy to use website will support parents who lack digital skills. So some parents may have never set a password before. They may not have their own email account. This is often key to a registration process. So how could you support these parents to register? And with this in mind, it's important to think about families who don't have easy access to the internet. How will they find out more detailed information? Are you promoting a phone number where parents can speak to someone? Mariam and Lorna, is there anything that you found works particularly well or doesn't work at all when passing on messages to local families?
I think what works really well in Reading is that we do have a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 FIS line open for parent carers, and we've found that, you know, in normal times that's been really helpful, but us actually, you know, through the pandemic, that's been actually a really good method of contact for the families who generally don't have access to the IT options that most other people may have access to. So having that 9 to 5 phone line has been really vital for some of those families. We also do assisted applications, which Lorna will probably talk about in a little bit more detail than me, but we as FISs and children's centres do assisted applications for those families who really need the help. But we actually find that a lot of families would like to do the applications themselves with a little bit of guidance. I think often when we offer assisted applications, they sort of say, can you just talk me through? So it's almost like they want to do it, which is really good. So it's almost empowering them to take that step and be able to do that process. And throughout that journey, we will stay in touch with them. We'll make sure that they've got childcare that they need, that meets their needs, for their 2-year funded place as well. So we'll guide them through the whole process. Lorna, is there anything else you want to add to that?
I'd just say, so with the assisted applications, obviously FIS and the children's centres can do assisted applications, but our childcare providers can also do them. So if a family's been sent a DWP postcard and they don't have access to the internet, that provider then knows that family is eligible, and we'll do the assisted application with them there and then. And also the early years team can do applications as well. So there's at least 4 avenues if the family can't do it themselves.
Also, the page information that we have on the FIS can all be translated in different languages, so we can convert that page and email that directly to the parent as well, so they can read it and hopefully understand what the funding's all about. And I think about the clear messaging as well. I think visuals really help. Having an image for the funding really helps. I think people recognise images and can associate. So if there's an image on your postcard or the letter that you may send out, that image will be at the childcare setting, so a lot of parents can understand, especially if they're reading or English language isn't as good as they want it to be. The image really helps them to kind of put the two together.
Absolutely fantastic, thank you. So the next thing we want to talk about is about reflecting your community, because we've talked quite a lot about BAME families already, but we know that concerns about culture can be a major barrier for some families, particularly concerns around children losing their home language or whether settings will support the family's culture or religion. And we've done some research on this, which is in Brent in particular, and we found that Black, Pakistani and Bangladeshi communities often felt that they wanted their children to be careful people who will uphold their own cultural and religious values and beliefs. And they have suspicion, they don't quite trust that formal childcare will provide this. And so it builds on what I was saying already about really understanding your local community and what parents in your local community want and need from childcare and early education. And once you understand that, it's about doing your best to reflect your community in your childcare offer. A key point about that can be finding out whether your local childcare workforce is representative of your community, your local area. And if it's not, thinking about whether there are ways that you can work with childcare providers to increase diversity and help to overcome some of those barriers for families. And when on promotional material, it can also be important to show diverse families and workers in the childcare settings to show that this really is an offer for everyone in the local area. So increasing diversity in the workforce, it could include promoting childcare as a career option to local communities or supporting childcare providers with their recruitment practices. And then where that has been successful, really promoting that, showing that, making sure it's visible to local families. Mariam and Lorna, you've talked quite a lot about some of this type of work already. Is there anything that you would want to add for things that you think are working well in reaching Reading's diverse communities?
I think in Reading, I think we found using the right language is really important. So making sure that you are using the correct language, supporting that kind of community. So we found often using things like, if you use childcare, it can be off-putting for some families, and using the word education may be more appropriate. I think with since the pandemic, I think a lot of families are quite keen to take up the funding. I think that a lot of children have missed out on the social aspect of meeting other children, and I think there's more of an appetite to kind of look at the funding and seeing what's available, how that can help their child's development. So it's looking at the child's development rather than using the word childcare, because I think often that childcare, the word childcare is associated with a requirement to leave a child with a childcare provider if parents are working, and it's kind of just adapting the language to meet the community's needs, and I think that really does help. I think it's just like it's kind of saying one size doesn't fit everything, and I think and the same applies to this as well. It's just making sure that you kind of give the message out in the right way to the right families.
So our next finding was that it's important to review your customer journey regularly, for example, every 3 months, to make sure it's as simple as possible for families, and where possible to gather feedback from parents on how they found it and improvements that could be made. A simple customer journey can make the difference between a parent registering for their early entitlement and giving up because it's just too difficult. Again, partnerships with parents and the local community will help you with your customer journey. I mean, you always have an understanding of what's working and what's not. So an example from Buckinghamshire, they make their applications for families if they have an older child who's used early education, using the information they already hold on the family. Mariam and Lorna, do you get any feedback from local parents about how they find the application process?
So I can say, so we've put together a survey I mentioned earlier. It's unfortunately not gone live yet to families, so hopefully within the next few weeks we'll get some excuse me, good feedback. But what I also do at least twice a term is email families that have completed an application, but they're not registered with a Reading provider, to see if they need support. Yeah, so then we do get a few. I always copy in the FIS team email address, so families can contact the FIS team directly, all the information's there, or they can come back to me directly and we can support them that way. So we've got feedback where families have done the application but then realised they actually wanted to keep the little one home. They've not been able to find a provider, so FIS will then help the families look for a provider. So we do get feedback, yeah, through those emails.
I think from an FIS point of view, we like I said previously, we do track back. So we contact a percentage of families at the end of the quarter just to get their feedback on their experience of accessing the childcare offer, and that includes 2-year funding, but also 3 and 4-year funding under 30 hours as well. And based on the feedback, that intelligence is used to improve our customer journey, how we promote the offers, how we need to improve our promotion of the offers, how to adapt and go with the gaps and the trends in information requests that are coming through. So that kind of intelligence is really important. We feed that back into the early years team, because FIS and early years work really closely together. And I think that is also another quite a vital comment that I want to make, is that I think that the partnership work between the Reading FIS and our early years team is really important. I think the two teams working together really helps promote the offers, also making sure that families are getting the information correctly, the childcare information is up to date. We manage a local offer as well, so it's making sure that those families who've got children with additional needs have access to the childcare information and services that are available to them. So it's really good joint partnership working, also working with our health partners as well. Must bring them in, because our health visitors and our health partners also really help towards informing families. They have direct contact with families, things, 2-year checks, etc. So it's really important that we work closely with them as well, and they do encourage take up, and they do encourage families to contact Family Information Service to find out more about the offer.
That's great, thank you. So our next point is quite a generic one. It's about going the extra mile for parents, but it's really about understanding what parents need and going as far as you can to meet those needs. So the two slightly different points here. The first one is around looking at ways that the free early education entitlement can support work, and particularly thinking about the fact that low income and BAME families might be more likely to be working atypical hours, so evenings or weekends. We know that the 15 hours offer isn't all completely ideal around supporting employment, but where providers do offer that flexibility to make it easier, it can be really great to promote that to families and talk about it, something that can help with employment, including if there are providers that offer the entitlement at weekends, because that could be something that works for local families. And then the other point is around looking at what you can do to sort of lighten the load for parents around the application process, and look at how the council can do more to more around the actual application to make it as easy as possible for families, particularly for families who are less confident with English. The golden ticket approach is really effective for this, but even without that, looking at where other ways in. So, for example, Buckinghamshire get in touch with families who are eligible to let them know where there are vacancies, and actually promote particular childcare provider vacancies to help take that step of finding a place out of the equation. It's been great to hear about what you've already said, Lorna and Mariam, around those 4 points of contact for assisted applications, because I think that's really, really powerful in really getting the information out there that there's help with that application process. Is there anything else that you would want to add around that, about ways that you've helped families through the application process?
I think, Megan, when families do contact us, they've contacted us for 2-year funding, generally because the early years team have got the DWP list. The information's gone out via the postcard, the families contacted us, and we normally know, so we schedule in provider updates for the year, and these provider updates match in with when the DWP list is likely to come in. So when that postcard goes out to families, the information on fees is as accurate, as up to date as we possibly can get it for vacancies. And that's really important as well, because what we don't want is families having to ring around lots of providers trying to find a place. So I think factoring kind of an annual, we try and plan it in for the year so that fits in quite well, and that seems to work really well. Also, when families contact us, when we speak to them, and they normally tell us that they're looking for 2-year funded place, so we'll do a whole conversation around the offer, but also during that conversation we'll offer the family, if a family is looking for English classes or looking to improve their skill sets, their confidence, then we'll go through options of what's available in the local community, things like New Directions, we've got community learning available for ESOL, things like that. So we'll have that whole conversation around how this funding can support the whole family, so it benefits the 2-year-old, but also what other benefits are available for the parent carers that are placing the call as well. And often that is a step into maybe employment or training or just improving their kind of confidence levels, but we find that that's a really good approach.
Fantastic, thank you.
That's great, thank you. So that brings us to our final finding, which is around COVID-19. This may act as a more significant barrier for BAME families. So BAME people are more likely to contract COVID-19 than white people, and are up to 4 times more likely to die if infected. BAME families have been hit hard by unemployment during the pandemic, and BAME workers have been twice as likely to lose their jobs. Additionally, children from BAME backgrounds have suffered greater mental health impact than white British children during the pandemic. And this is largely because BAME people are more likely to die of COVID-19 and are also more likely to live in multi-generational homes, which adds anxiety about bringing the virus home from school and infecting elderly relatives. This all means more now than ever. It's crucial for services for children and young people to be co-produced with and informed by the needs of Black, Asian and minority ethnic children and young people. and their communities. Mariam and Lorna, are you doing promotion of the offer differently or using any different messages in light of COVID?
I think, as I've said previously, I think we've tried to keep the messaging consistent. So I think it's great having big campaigns, and Lorna and the early years team and us, we've done bigger campaigns, and they're great to raise profile of the offer, but I think consistent messaging through our partner agencies, consistent messaging through social media platforms, consistent messaging through our faith groups, that has really, we've maintained that throughout the pandemic, because I think it was really important to kind of keep that information going. We also set up some dedicated pages on FIS, just to keep families informed that childcare is still available, and is still accessible, and I think for us in Reading, it's just keeping that consistent message going, and kind of maintaining that. Working with childcare providers is really, really important, yeah, I think that's we haven't done anything really different, to be fair. I think we've just maintained what we've always continued to do, to encourage take up. Lorna, is there anything else you want to add?
I'll just quickly add that so the DWP list is shared between our 4 clusters in Reading, and the team have a crib sheet when they're phoning the families. So this was updated to include a small sort of section about COVID-19, in that our providers do have risk assessments and they're available on request, just to give families that reassurance that providers were doing and following the COVID guidelines.
Thank you both so much. Those are all the findings that we wanted to go through today. If that's been interesting to you, I would encourage you to have a look at the guide, because that's got all the evidence, the references, and everything in there, and just more detail on everything that we've talked about today. But I really hope you've found that useful, and I'll hand back to James.
Yes, thank you, everybody. That was a really useful session, and good to see lots of ideas and examples and case studies, and use of partnerships. I'm certainly aware that the Reading FIS was one of the first information services back in the days, over 20 years ago, and has always been at the forefront of practice. So wonderful to see that you are still keeping up and doing all of that really good work. I think one thought from me is that children of Black, Asian, minority ethnic families going into preschool learning is so valuable for their language development. Often there's a fear or an anxiety of families that they will lose their home language if another language is spoken at home, but actually all the evidence suggests that actually there's a unique and golden opportunity for children like those to go into settings and develop 2 or 3 languages, and those skills stay with them for the whole of their lives. So if you want to see the evidence, have a look at the work that Edward Meluish has done in that area. It's very compelling, and a primary reason why we should be getting more children into early years provision. So I hope everybody will use the trends and the ideas and the examples in their local strategies, importantly to differentiate and to individualise the work that we do with all the families that we work with, because we all want all eligible families of 2-year-olds to be reached, engaged, and taking up this the advantage of this entitlement that's available to them. Local strategies should be just that, they should be local. So use the stuff that we've shared in today and in the guide. Use it how you need to use it in your local areas, depending on what local need and demand is and what the local resources are, and most importantly, what's possible. So we hope it's been really useful for you, and it's been an awful lot of hard work going into it. Thank you everybody in the team for making that happen, and that's it from us. Thank you.